Saint Anthony, the lover of animals, the saint who started the nativity, the saint who preached to the birds, the saint who was in wonder and awe about all creation, and on whom we call when we think about caring for God's creation. That very Saint Francis, did I say something different? Did I talk about Saint Francis or Saint Augustine? Saint Anthony, I'm so sorry. I blew this one. Yes, I really did. Yeah. So Saint Francis, you recognized him. Yeah. So Saint Francis, it is said, he became a saint once he got off his so-called high horse. He was of more wealthy background. But when he saw a leper, and this is not a leopard who has the spots, but someone who was suffering of leprosy, which is an infectious skin disease that eats up fingers and all of that. So when Saint Francis saw this person suffering of leprosy, he recognized Jesus in this person. He let go of his old life. He hugged this person. And he felt that deep call to serve those who were hurting and struggling. So, kind of a turn in his life from his background to service and caring. And it is told that St. Francis felt so deeply connected with Jesus that in his hands the stigmata, and stigmata is the Greek for the wound marks. So the wound marks of Jesus became visible in his hands. So it's kind of to feel the pain and the suffering like Jesus and to serve like Jesus makes us feel that pain as well. And that may be physical, as told about St. Francis, or it may be in a spiritual way when we feel compassion and care and empathy for those who are hurting. And St. Paul, now this is really the St. Paul, this is not St. Anthony or St. Francis. St. Paul in the New Testament describes that our suffering, what we hurt, where we suffer, where we feel the pain of the world, that ache, that heaviness, that connects us with the suffering of Jesus. So through the suffering, through the pain, through the burden and heaviness, we are connected with Jesus. He actually says we contribute or participate by feeling that in the suffering of Jesus as well. Now, the lovely and the most beautiful part of this story is, for me, on one hand, yes, we can ask questions, we can doubt, that is welcome, I think, and we're getting to that in just a little bit. But the wonderful thing is, for me, when Jesus appears to his disciples, the wound marks are visible. And that is so true and so real for us, isn't it? Like, I have a scar here, it has healed. I was, as a kid, mowing grass, not with a mower, but we had one of these, a scythe. Now, you sharpen the scythe. How do you do it? You hold it like this and you, well, I didn't pay attention, so I got my stitches in. It healed, yes. Oh, yes, yeah, like 9 stitches or so. But it's still visible. It's healed. And I think something like that happens not just to our physical bodies, but we're all wounded people just by being human. We have been bumped around. We survived, we made it through, we grew up, and we carry some of those wounds. What I love about this image of the risen one, the wounds are visible. They're healing, but they're still visible. And that makes for the resurrection the new life that doesn't deny the suffering or takes the suffering away. The suffering is still visible even though we have been healing and are in the process of healing. In that sense, we don't get over things, but we grow bigger than the wounds and the suffering which we have experienced. And that is part of the transformation that is happening in this story, in this Bible passage, but also that happens in our lives if and how we participate in Jesus' resurrection ourselves, where we are raised into a new life, into healing, into wholeness, which is not the absence of our scars and of our wounds, but a transformation of them. The first piece about this passage that I really love and treasure is, it says there, the disciples were locked in behind locked doors because they were afraid. They were scared. And we all know that fear, we can be locked in fear. We can be like paralyzed, like that bunny that sees a snake. It's kind of, or we can be locked in fear. But Jesus appears in their midst. Somehow, some way, Jesus finds a way into their fear to come into. And that's for me a very comforting, a very beautiful passage that when I feel like afraid or worried or scared, somehow Jesus wants to come to me in that fear, in that worry, in that anxiety and all. And he comes into, and what does Jesus do? Jesus says, "Peace be with you." And he breathes on them. You know, sometimes when you're really afraid, when you worry, you're like, you try to hold your breath or you're all tightened up and then you feel like, So the breathing, breathe deeply, connect, open up. Something about a peacefulness when we can relax and know someone who cares, someone is with us, someone who holds us, whether it's physically like we hold a baby that is really upset or a little child who is worried and afraid. We hold them literally, physically, but also knowing for us that we're being held in our worries and in our fears and we can hold each other. That is Jesus' life-sustaining breath. And I'm sure that John, who wrote this story down, remembered that very first story of creation where God shaped humankind from the dust and the dirt of the ground, molded it. And then it says, God breathed the breath of life into this lump of clay, and it became a human soul. You see, the breathing, the breath that makes us come alive. This is just like the creation story. Humankind, Adam becomes a living soul. We become fully and newly alive, the new life, the resurrection life, when the Spirit breathes in us and when we, through our breath, connect with the Spirit of God. New creation. Resurrection as new creation. And then, just as you, Wendy, shared, we want to know, I want to know, I want proof, I want to know, did it happen like that? Is it real? Is Jesus really among us, the risen one? And what is proof for Thomas, what is proof to the disciples, and I think what is proof to us is that our suffering is not denied. So they recognize Jesus through the wounds, through his suffering. That it's not just hallucination or not just their imagination, or they've seen a ghost or a spirit or had a dream or whatever. So it's not Jesus not as the detached reality, but in our midst, Jesus who transforms us, who is present with us in and through our wounds, who is healing us, and through whom our wounds are being transformed. There's this old wisdom story, and I love it, where someone comes to Jerusalem and asks, where do I find the Messiah? Where do I find the Messiah? And someone points him and says, go to the gate where the people gather who are suffering. That's where you will find him. The person goes to the gate, and he finds Jesus among those who are suffering, who are hurting. And what Jesus does, he has wounds too. What Jesus does, he's unbinding only one wound at a time, and not unbinding all wounds, because when we're too exposed, when our wounds are too many, too fresh, too open up, we become overwhelmed. But Jesus unbinds only, or the Messiah unbinds only one wound, and through that wound healing can happen, the wounded healer. So we can participate in healing when we become aware of our own wounds, where we are hurting. We connect often from wound to wound and invite healing to come to us. And that's what I think Rumi meant when he says the wound is where the light enters you, where the wound is where grace and love enters us, where our need is, our hurt. That's where it happens. You know the old Japanese art of kintsugi? Beautiful piece of pottery. It just smashes, it crashes, falls apart in many, many pieces. Now, you could try to stick it all together and make the wounds or the cracks invisible. The art of kintsugi doesn't do that. It fills the cracks with gold. The cracks where we have been wounded are filled with spirit. That's where the light touches us, where we can open up, where the Spirit reaches us. So what about faith and doubt? Faith, to me, is so important not to confuse with certainty. Certainty is the opposite, or is the enemy of unity, of understanding, of togetherness, of tolerance. Because if I am certain, it's almost like my way or the highway. You experience that often, don't you? It's almost like I'm so certain doesn't leave room for conversation. A mature faith asks questions and invites questions and doubt, and a faith that tries to understand and go deeper opens up beyond the certainty, because certainty can hurt, can kill, denies relationship. What about the wounds, the hurts, the suffering in which we all participate? How can healing come through them? I remember this beautiful story of a grandma, let's call her Mary, who is rocking her granddaughter in her lap. It's a beautiful spring day. They're out on the porch. And Lily, her granddaughter, feels Grandma's love. She's in her lap and she hears the birds and the fresh spring breeze, and it's just delightful for her. So Lily, as Grandma Mary rocks her, at some point she looks at Grandma's hands. And the hands are scarred and disfigured. And Lily looks again at them. And she looks again at them and she wonders and she asks her Grandma Mary, "Grandma, why do you have ugly hands?" And Grandma continues to rock little Lily. She rocks her for a while. And then she starts telling Lily the story. When you, my precious Lily, were a little tiny baby, our house caught on fire. I was the only one there, so I grabbed you, held you to my chest, and ran through the flames to make it into safety. And Lily said, "Grandma, you have beautiful hands.